In step 4 of this tutorial, we will be going over a few cool effects and filters to use. So when we use a filter, it's good to apply it to a layer that has all of the information in one layer. Right now, this information that we're seeing here is split up over a couple of different layers. If we ran the filter right now, it would actually just get applied to the bark, but we need it to also be affecting this bottom layer. So to do this step, essentially it's like saving out a flattened TIFF and copying it back in to give you a copy of everything together in one layer on the top. And it's just an easy step, but it's a lot of control keys to hold down. So click on a thumbnail, and it needs to be a picture thumbnail, and hold down Command, Option, and Shift, and then push the letter E, which will jump up a new layer, and it has all of that. It is a copy of everything that we see right here. This layer, name it Blur, and then go to the Filter menu and choose Blur, and then we'll be using Iris Blur. That's the one that will do kind of a circular blur. You'll see what I mean here when we get it going. Photoshop CS6 had some really great upgrades made in the blur gallery, and it used to be a little dinky window with a really tiny little preview, and this way we can see a lot more of what's going on. So you can move the center focus by clicking and dragging this double circle, and I want that pretty much probably right between his eyes. The amount of blurriness out here is controlled in a couple of places. You can either move the slider over here more or less, or you can click and drag on this circle. That's what the white line indicates, and if you drag up it's less blur, or if you go drag down it's more blur, and I don't want it to be crazy blurry. Maybe somewhere about like that. And also you can affect the area that is blurred and isn't blurred. So if you click down on one of these little control handles and drag it, you can increase the distance of area that the cover will be sharp, or the picture will be sharp. Can't even talk now. And you can also click and drag these little circles in here to make the transition a more gradual one if you bring it in closer. I know I want his eyes to be absolutely in sharp focus, but after that things can start getting a little bit blurry. You don't usually want it to be an abrupt transition, because then it looks fake. It looks like you've got a piece of frosted glass and cut a hole in it. But if you let it have some room to breathe, then it can look like it might have actually happened in camera. And this is still a little bit much on his hand, so I'm going to drag that down a little more. Once you get it the way you like it, you can either hit Enter or click OK, and that will add a blur. Your computer has to think about it for a second, so I'm going to turn this off and on so you can see the difference. So we lose some of the detail there and down around his hand, and I really like that. Okay, we're going to do a similar thing. We need a copy of this layer because we're going to run another filter, but this time it's going to be lighting. So you can either drag it down to the new layer image, or you can hit Command J to jump it up. This one, name Light, or Lighting. We'll go with Lighting. Go back up to Filter, choose Render, and Lighting Effects. This gallery is a little bit bigger than the last one we looked at. You can add multiple points of light. There's 3 different types. If you look in this little drop down, it tells you which type there. There's point, spot, and infinite. And just to show you what a spot is, I'm going to add one. Or actually, because that other one was selected, it has changed it to a spot. So spotlight is as if there's a light pointed up at the top coming down instead of shining directly at the canvas. So I'm going to change that back to point because that's more like what we needed. Now, how do we affect this? The area that is affected by the light is controlled by this outer yellow bar, and you can click on that and drag it. About there looks pretty good. Mostly, again, I want to increase the focus on this area, but if you can look right here by his nose, some of that detail is getting really blown out. It's like somebody splat a big wad of white on his face. I don't want it quite that intense, so I'm going to lower the intensity just a tiny bit to get some of that detail back. Maybe put it up. So this is a lot of tweaking stuff, and you can play with some of these other sliders. You can play with the size of the circle and get it to where you think it looks really good. Mostly we want his face to all be fairly well lit and then things to dim out from there. There are some really fun custom settings that you can play with, but we only need the one light this time, so you can either click OK or hit return to finish it. Click OK. And again, it'll think about it for a minute. And there it goes. So just to back up so you can see our progress so far, here's what we started with. Then we added texture and a little bit of blur and a little bit of lighting. And that's quite a big difference right there from what we started with. So save your progress and we'll move on to the next step.